This 33-story building, slated to house Thailand's Auditor General's offices, collapsed during the Myanmar earthquake, March 28, 2025. Likely the most videoed building collapse ever. But how did this beautiful building design go from the bragging pride of the Chinese contractor to being topped off, like you see here, and built to this lovely final shape? How did it go from this to collapsing like this in the middle of an earthquake that was 600 miles away when it should have easily stood its ground? I mean, look, even this building here in Myanmar survived. It toppled over a little bit, but it didn't come collapsing down. So fasten your seatbelts. It's going to be a bumpy ride as we analyze some video of the collapse to determine what failed first. And then we look at new forensic testing and analysis evidence from the Thai government on what caused this collapse, causing this 33-story skyscraper to come pancaking down into a rubble pile the size of a 6-story building, killing at least 29 people and 75 or so missing. And the new potential criminal angle that the Thai government investigation is now sort of pointing to, with the potential for future criminal charges against the Chinese. I have a few more views to show you here. Some of these are much clearer than the ones we showed you last week. But look at this. You can see the crane really swaying there. And then you'll see the building collapse like right here. So down it goes. And then you're going to see, after this one here, here's another new view. And this one starts off showing a pretty good chunk of the entire building there before they zoomed into it. And then it's going to come down there. And a lot of people from this street apparently shot that video, because I've seen other videos from similar views that just weren't as clear. Here's another one from the opposite side of the construction site. And there it was just not really clear, but look how bad that crane was swaying there. Just unbelievable rocking and rolling there right before the collapse right here. So you can see down it goes. And I'm surprised these people didn't run, because you're going to see that dust cloud coming through the building there right towards the camera. But anyway, here's another view from that other street that you can see just about everybody in the world's got their cameras out. I think this was the most videoed building collapse in the history of time right here. So many people captured this from so many angles. Okay, so as we search for the root cause real quick, I just want to show you this whole section here with this shear wall part of the core. The core starts in the middle and sort of extends to the outer edge of the building. But watch, you're going to see this area right in here drop before the rest of the building does. And watch, I'm going to move it over a little bit. And right here, you're starting to see some distortion here on these floors. So even below it, it's already dropped down. So I think this probably started at the ground level and just dropped lower. But you can see this starting to drop lower. The roof is sort of okay, but I think it's getting ready to drop. And watch it. See, so right here, there goes the roof. The roof is dropping like this. But look, see the column here? All of these supports were still doing their job right up until the last second. But you can definitely see that this section right here is lower than the rest of the building. So that says to me this part started to sink. Yeah, the alluvial soil is bouncing around like a bowl of jello because of the earthquake. And then you can see it just goes further and further down. And as you can see, I mean, look, right before the building starts to slide down, you can definitely see that this section in here is lower than everything else. And then here, when we look at this video, I hate it when they put the text right over the building, because it's going to be right where I need to see it, right? So let's go a little bit here and kind of zoom in. And so there's where the collapse is starting. And again, you get a great view here that all three of these columns are still doing their job. All of the columns all the way around the edge are holding this roof up. Problem is the roof is sagging in the middle, because the middle section, as you can see right here, is dipping below everybody else at this point in time. So what I don't see at this point was there a collapse down below it all the way to the ground, or did something just simply happen right up in here in the core, where something gave away here, and once these start to pancake, that's it. You have a structure that can no longer support that type of a falling dynamic load, and then it just starts pancaking all the way down to the ground. Because I believe at this point, the central core of the building has already started collapsing, and we are just now seeing it on the outside. You can see the panels are starting to pop loose over here, which means there's movement on these columns going down to the ground. So it is still possible that, yeah, maybe there was an issue down at the ground where all I had to do was sink probably just a few inches to make everything start to drop like that. But there's where it started. You can see that middle section drops below. See, it's dropping before these parts of the floor drop. And so already you can see these columns are snapping under the pressure. Now this video clip gives us the most clues right here, so watch this very carefully. See, watch all of these floors. Notice how they're all level here, and you're going to watch this whole strip of the shear wall here is going to start sliding down. Let me move this down a little bit here for you. You can see it right there. So it's already preceding, and it's going all the way down at this point. And remember that this section is attached to the central core, which I believe at this point is sinking as well. But one thing that we know definitely for sure is this section is sliding right down the side of the building. Let me go up and down there for you so you can watch it go. See, it's sliding right down the building, and it's taking it with it. And keep in mind that by the time it's starting to slide just a little bit, the panels down at the bottom here are already starting to pop, the glass panels. And you can see now there's just so much stress here that all these connections are popping. But look, it's amazing how these columns, they look spindly, but man, they held up right till the very end. Okay, now here's another really good one. This is probably the most clearest zoomed in shot we've got. And I want you to focus on this area right here, because I'm going to move it ahead to the next little frame there. And, you know, unfortunately, these people, their cameras bouncing all over the place. But you can see that these columns here already started snapping, and everything below it, it appears to be already moving. These are breaking, these are already breaking, but it's because these are here have already gone downward, and you could see that downward angle, and they're dragging this column inward at this angle. So this section is falling lower before any of these other sections do. And then you can see as you look down the building, you can already see the rippling of the windows, all of these panels, which says to me that there's already movement down here at the bottom of the building. So as you look, and then see, there's your next step there. Now, I would not expect the Thai government to spend all of the same time and effort that NIST did here in the United States when we had that Champlain Towers condo collapse here in Miami in the town of Surfside back in 2021, where they created databases with over 15,000 image records. They recovered every single piece meticulously from the debris collapse site, and they brought it all to a warehouse, and they laid everything out in perfect orientation like you would in an airplane disaster, and everything is marked and photographed and lasered and scanned and modeled into the software so they can now model the building to see how well everything connected together. Unfortunately, you're probably not going to see that here, because it seems like they've sort of narrowed in already to what they think is the answer, and this could actually be turning into a criminal case, I think. Okay, so if I pull up the Google Street Maps view, here it is from July 2024. So we're directly in front of the base of the building now. So we can take a look. Now, let me just show you something. So there was some retail shops right here on the left, and they used to be all over here too. These were torn down probably in the past year or two to make room for the entire project. But so let's take a look at the bottom of it. And here we can see our typical flat slab with concrete columns. Now you can do a 33-story building with flat slab and concrete like this, as long as you do it right. If it was built right, it should work. This is what the engineers are going to be looking at here. Are these columns thick enough? Was there enough rebar in them? And so was this a build issue, or was it a materials issue? Could the concrete have been bad? Could the rebar rods have been bad? And so that's what we're going to focus on in a minute, is those rebar rods, because they did some testing on them. But as you look up here, you know, you really don't see anything that looks that much out of place. And I wouldn't worry too much about what you're seeing here. This is probably stitching from photographs. this is not anything wrong with the columns. As we look up the building, can we see anything that might give us a hint as to what happened? Now, one subtle change that I can see here, that if you look here on this is the second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, right around the 8th floor. You see what I noticed here? I don't know if this is correct or not, but it looks to me like the column suddenly gets thinner right here, going into the 9th floor and above. Sometimes they do this because they do calculations and they realize, okay, you need higher PSI concrete at the bottom than you do as you start to go up. So the engineers will look at that and see if they made the right calculations here, and that whether or not these columns are the correct width here, because they do look like they got a little bit more narrow, unless it's just, shadowing from the paint or something, but a little bit hard to tell, but certainly they want to look at that. And then likewise, if we take a look around the back side of the building where the crane is, see right up here, this is viewed from the freeway. And so let's zoom in and see what we can get here. And we can see that going up the backside of this building appears to be like a shear wall. And it goes all the way up here to the top. And this looks like it was shot in April of 2024, after they did the topping off ceremony, which I think was done in early April 2024. So that's what the building is looking like before it collapsed. Okay, so this is what the building looked like before it collapsed. And there's that now famous crane that was seesawing back and forth and went down with the ship. And so here in Bangkok, Thailand, while rescuers were busy rummaging through the rubble looking for potential survivors, representatives from Thailand's industry ministry showed up to grab some samples of rebar rods to take them in for testing, because they probably suspected there's something wrong with this rebar. And so this begins the investigation. So last week, they did a live stream from the Thai Industrial Standards Institute, where they brought several samples that you can see there on the table of these rebar rods, and they were going to test them right there live for the reporters to see, for all of the media to have equal access to it and to be transparent as possible. They wanted to know, was there anything wrong with these rebar rods? So then they brought all of the media folks into this room where they lined up some of the rebar rods, and they're going to mark them in order to get them ready to cut them up. And man, would I love to own this machine. Look at this thing. It's a massive wet saw, and it's designed to cut. There it is, cutting the first piece right there. He's got it all marked, and he just slices right through it. It takes probably less than 30 seconds for it to slice through that big old thick 32 millimeter rebar rod. And now that they've cut the rods, you can see he's displaying it to the cameras, and you can see a nice, shiny, very smooth cut there. And they're going to take these rods and stick them in a machine that shines a light onto them, and it will tell them the chemical makeup. And there are the two devices under test from those rebar slices. They almost look like little cigar ends, don't they? So they're going to take this and stick this into the machine. And there he is, inserting it right there on the test bed. And then that head comes down on there, and the head is what I believe shines the light onto it, and they determine from there what the chemical makeup is. So then it displays on the computer screen about 5 minutes later all of the elements that it finds. Now he's pointing out all the elements that are there and what percentages that they found in there to determine whether or not these rebar rods are standard or substandard, whether they pass the TIS standard that I showed you earlier. So he's going around and pointing them, and when they get down on the second line, they're going to hit boron, and that's the one that I think gave them kind of pause, because they'll point to it a few different times. So he's going across the column there, and the important ones that they're looking for are carbon, silicone, and boron. I heard them mention a couple of times that were the most important ones. And see, he's looking at it right there, and he keeps pointing back to the boron. So here you can see what he's doing then is we have a much clearer close-up shot. So he's showing the carbon, and he's showing the silicone elements that are in there. And then they're going to come back and point again to the boron. So I think they're suspecting that there's something wrong with the level of boron that is in these rebar rods. So you're kind of seeing this here live as it was going on in a Zoom call. So then they went back out to the lobby and continued on with their press conference, letting them photograph everything close up, all of the samples. Okay, so here's the test results. They said that the 20 millimeter deformed steel bar had lower weight than the standard, and that the 32 millimeter deformed steel bar failed the tension standard. They weren't specific about what was wrong with the boron content, but obviously it didn't help matters.
Now, it is pretty important that this rebar weighs the amount that it's supposed to weigh according to the specs. So in the engineering world, that's why we have these specs, and you have to meet this spec. If the rebar rod is lighter than it should be, it's not going to be as strong as it should be, because it means that you're not using as much material in there to make this rebar rod. And so this is often a sign of counterfeit rebar rods, my friends.
So when you look here at this article on about how to identify counterfeit rebar, and let's zoom in for a closer look, you can see number one here, it tells us the actual size is smaller than the nominal size of a specification about the actual weight of the purchase by the dealer. The theoretical weight delivery to earn the amount of metal to reap huge profits. Not translated to English in the best way, but you get the idea of what they're trying to say. And then the intensity is low. I don't know if they mean the weight, if they're referring to the weight here. And then, of course, here, 3, the failure rate of the chemical composition. The main reason is the failure of small rolling mill raw material mixing with the soil due to rebar steel billet rolling. So again, a little fuzzy on the English, but certainly you could see they're pointing here to smaller than nominal size as one of their items to look for to identify counterfeit rebar. But wait, it actually gets better here, because the Thai authorities arrested 4 Chinese nationals who were trying to sneak off of the site of the 33-story building collapse with a whole bunch of files and stuff like that. So those folks are now in custody. And also the plot thickens because they traced the steel that was made to this factory here. This is called the Xin Ke Yuan Steel Company Limited. This is a Chinese-owned company, and this is located in Rayong, Thailand. And so I'll show you where it is in relation to Bangkok. So it's right here, and then Bangkok is up here. So it's about 100 miles or so southeast of Bangkok. But wait, we're not done, folks. The plot thickens even more, because back in 2023, in fact, specifically in December of 2023, Thailand's industry ministry had shut down this factory for multiple violations of industrial work laws, and they were failing to meet the steel standards. So apparently they've had problems with this steel in the past from this same factory. And then in January 2024, the government seized 2,444 tons of steel bars worth probably about a couple $1 million USD, and told the company to recall their steel bars from the market. And so basically they weren't allowed to use this stuff anymore. Oops. So now that's a little bit too late, because now you can see what's going on here, because they topped off this building in April of 2024. So they're not sure then how much steel made it from that factory to the construction site of this 33-story building in Bangkok. And it's too late now. It's already built in, and then the building's already collapsed. But wait, there's more, because the plot is still thickening here on this channel. We always dig deep and find more for you. Some of the officials had stated that this Xin Ke Yuan factory used outdated Chinese melting technology, which is no longer effective for steel bar production. So the implications here can be pretty bad for this company if it turns out that their materials were bad. The other thing that's been coming out of all of this discussion here too is a lot of people are saying in that area there seems to be a lot of counterfeit rebar made by Chinese manufacturers, which is kind of strange. It's like, who would counterfeit that? You mold it, you melt it, you make it. What's so hard about making rebar? Unless they're just trying to do it cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, may pass code initially, but then when you go and actually pull the rebar from sites and do some testing, you're going to find you're getting something different. You're not getting that Oreo cookie that you thought you were getting. Okay, so I made this table up here for you as we look at the close-up shot of the picture of the rebar. And so if you're wondering what is this DB32 SD50 rebar, so the DB32 means it's a deformed bar and it's 32 millimeters in diameter. So the deformed means it has these ridges on it, which are made to help the concrete bond better. In fact, I've never in my life even seen a regular smooth rebar on a construction site before. And then the SD50 that you see right here, it means that it's steel deformed bar with a minimum yield strength of 500 megapascals, which is about 72,000 psi. So if you have this stamped on your rebar, this means that you are now conforming to the deformed steel bars spec from Thailand, which is TIS 24-2559. You don't need to know these numbers or anything, but it's just that's the spec that they use in that country to make sure that all of the steel rebar used on a project is conforming and that it's of good quality and that it is usable in the project that they are using it for. Now, this was interesting because in Thailand, industry ministry people said that the standard rebars with ridges are required in sizes of DB16, DB20, and DB25 in order to reinforce concrete. This is bigger. This is DB32. You would think bigger is better. Why isn't it? Yeah, so a lot of people were debating online last week whether or not they should have used that type of rebar on this site. And so the bottom line here is that that is appropriate and it is commonly used for 30-plus story buildings if it's properly manufactured rebar, which we're going to find out soon, fully certified under Thailand's TIS 24-2559, and if it's installed according to design specs. So all of those have to be true in order for it to be good to use. And so why is all of this so important about like the size of this rod and the materials that make it up? So some of the experts were saying that this DB32 SD50 steel might meet certain tensile strength criteria per the Thailand spec, okay, but it has issues with yield strength. And other experts also noted too that these steel rebar are two-layered, which means they're harder on the outside and softer on the inside. Almost sounds like a candy or something. Anyway, so they say that this makes it likely to crack and it gives it reduced strength when it's twisted. So some people say that this type is unsuitable for building tall buildings. Now, I don't know why people have a problem with this. I always thought it meant that this was a good thing. Now, as you look on the screen here at this piece of rebar, if you look to the right of the SD50, you'll see a T that's imprinted on there. And so in Thailand, this usually means it's core tempering, which refers to the heat treatment process used to manufacture temp core rebar. And so it's supposed to give you a tough, ductile core and a hard, strong outer layer. And so what does this really mean for us? Well, it means that you're getting this temp core treated steel, and it's supposed to be higher ductility. It's supposed to have improved bendability, higher thermal resistance, higher yield strength. And so the way they do it is the red hot steel bar passes through these cold water jets. So I guess it's cooled off a lot quicker. So it creates a tough outer shell, and then the heat from the core tempers the shell as the bar cools, and the inside remains ductile. So you get a rebar that's strong on the outside and tough and flexible on the inside. And yes, there are many TIS approved mills in Thailand that produce these temp core bars. So the T symbol on the bar, in my opinion, does not mean that the bar is substandard quality like other people might think. The only thing that makes it substandard quality is if the bar itself is substandard quality and the manufacturer screwed up with the metallurgy process and maybe it fails to meet the spec. Now here, I want you to tell me in the comments down below whether you agree with me or not, but I'm not sure I agree with the strategy they're doing here to try to pull people out of the rubble or whatever they were trying to do here. But it doesn't make sense that you would use these scissor shear tools on the end of your boom to cut through all of that concrete there, especially at the bottom of the pile, because it's not like you're going to pull these floor sections out or anything. All you're doing is crumbling the concrete and making things worse than when you started, because all the concrete crumbles away, and now you're just left with a big spaghetti pile of twisted up rebar that now how are you going to get all that out of the way? It doesn't make any sense to me. I would think what makes the most sense is that you bring in some taller cranes and start at the top of the pile and just start lifting some of the floor pads and stuff off until you work your way down to the bottom. I think that makes the most sense. This way, also, you're not risking any potential survivors. But of course, you know my opinion that whenever there's a pancaking of a building like this, just like with the Champlain Towers in Miami, there weren't any survivors found inside the rubble pile. Only a 15-year-old boy that was on an exterior balcony and rode it down to the bottom was the only survivor. Now, if you missed my video from last week where I talked about the Myanmar earthquake in general, and I showed you all of that damage that was going on there, you can check this video out over here. And then if you want to see my other video on the FIU bridge collapse, it's one of my best engineering studies yet to date. You can check this video out right over here. So thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see all of you on the next one.